Good. So with that, it's time for the next session. Basically complementing what Mark was just presenting. Thanks a ton, Mark, for your great demo and presentation. The next session is going to cover specifically the 20.1 new features in Spatial Studio, and we have Carol and LJ who will be presenting that. Without further ado, over to you, Carol.
Thank you. So Mark, great. You made my life a lot easier. You did a great overview, and I appreciate that. So we are on the third release of Spatial Studio, and what I'll do is just give a brief overview, just a few slides of the major new features, and then LJ will spend the majority of the time on the demos. I'm not going to go over this because Mark explained everything on what Spatial Studio is all about. Basically, the reason we came out with it is because prior to Spatial Studio, developers, you really had to be a developer to access spatial features in Oracle database, and no SQL, PL SQL, Java, and so that is no longer the case. And I also want to mention that it is included through the database license, because that was a question as well. Mark did a great job of talking about the workflow. There was, again, questions on geocoding. And if you are using Studio, geocoding is done through our Oracle Maps cloud service, and that is free of charge, so you don't have to worry about paying for that. And there was a question on shapefiles, and you can see in Excel spreadsheets, you can upload those into Studio as well as GeoJSON, and there will be more coming in the next release. So for 20.1, we focused on the following enhancements. More visualization choices, so I'll talk about those. You can do more with projects. Mark touched upon the time slider, viewing change over time. I'll discuss that. He also talked about the new analytics category. He didn't really address it, but I'll tell you what that's all about. If you're a developer, you can access spatial features via REST APIs, so you can do things programmatically. And there are some enhanced administrative functions, and you can do some customization as well. That will come in handy. I'm not going to go into all these features. We have about a dozen major features and quite a few others as well. But if you download Spatial Studio, you'll get the release notes, and you can see exactly what we have in this release that came out in December. Okay, so the first feature is GeoRaster Visualization. So you can now create and visualize imagery data, such as satellite data, stored in the spatial GeoRaster type. So what you would do is you would create a data set like you normally would, as in the screenshot at the top. Then when you select items to create the data sets, you'll see tables and views as you normally do, and now you have the GeoRaster category. You choose the table you want to visualize, you then go configure it, whether you want single raster mode or virtual mosaic. Once you have your map layer, after you create your project and create your map layer, as Mark showed you, you can do a lot of styling. So the styling tab is there. And now there are some more raster specific options for you to do some more specific visualization fine tuning on your map. When you see in red here means that there is a blog written on this topic, and there are about 5 of those. So you can get more detailed information on how to use this specific feature. We have a new 3D visualization, and this is for 3D city models and point clouds. Those are now supported. Now these 3D city models and point clouds must be pre-generated as 3D tile sets outside of Studio, and then uploaded to Studio Server. So they're not stored in the database. You can do that as a zip file or as an FTP, depending on the size of the tile sets. We're using Cesium JavaScript API to render the maps. And when you look at your visualization, you'll see the usual tables and maps, and now there's a new category, Cesium maps. And this is a screenshot of a 3D city model of New York City. So you can pan, zoom, and tilt, all kinds of things for visualization purposes. Previous release of Studio, we had 4 background maps to choose from. That is still the case. They use Oracle Maps Cloud Service to access those background maps. However, we had quite a few customers who told us that they were inside a firewall and could not access the internet. And they asked us to have the ability to have locally hosted custom-based maps, which is what we added in this release. So you can do that pretty easily. If you're an administrator, you go to base maps, you add base map, and you can choose a raster tile or a vector tile. Has to be Mapbox compatible. And if you're not inside our firewall, you can, of course, go to custom-based maps that are hosted on third-party servers. Just one thing to remember is that the domain of the URL must be on the safe domains list. So you probably should maybe do that first. And then there won't be an issue with getting access from the browser to the third-party servers. Okay, so Mark talked a little bit about the time slider. It is really a very powerful feature. And it's used with map layers that have date and time columns. So if you have a date and time column and you have a map layer, you'd go into settings, and then you'd have the ability to turn on the time slider. Once you turn it on, you actually get the time slider, as you can see here in the bottom, and then you can filter data for range of time or specific date time point. So it goes go all the way from years, quarters, months, all the way down to seconds. So a really powerful feature. And as you can see, there's a blog on this as well. We now have access token support. So you can access Studio features through REST APIs if you're a developer. So you don't have to log into Studio. This will enable you to use command line tools like curl or postman to invoke REST endpoints directly. So that's really a nice feature. You can do things programmatically. And to do that, you go into Profile. You see access tokens. You see the existing tokens that you have today. So if you're administrator, you'll see everybody's. If you're not, you'll just see your own. Then if you want to create a new access token, you give it a name, the amount of time you want it to be valid. So 2 hours is the default. And if you say -1, it'd be for an indefinite period of time. Then decide on what scope you want, read only or read write. So it's pretty simple. One thing that I'm encouraging you to remember is that you need to copy the access token string and keep it safe. And of course, for security reasons, you're only going to see it once, and that's why that is the case. If you can see here, when you look at existing tokens, you just see the last 8 characters. So that's not going to help you out if you lose it. Okay. There is a new spatial analytics category. This is an easy to understand interface for commonly used spatial analysis operations that may require chaining of operations, multiple steps. Some of the analysis operations are a little bit tricky. We wanted to make a no-brainer UI for you to follow so that you could just fill in parameter values. One that you see here is summarized by region, for example. LJ might show you this in his demo, but if you, for example, wanted to take all the COVID cases by state and then show that in the US, that'd give you the ability to do that. So this could have taken a little bit of time to do previously, and now it's right here in this new analytics category, as you see under spatial analysis operations. So the most optimized predefined SQL query is used for that. We now have public data sets and public published projects. So data sets that are based on public domain data can be set to public. As you can see in this screenshot here, I have public schools, and I have also analysis that I've done as well. You can set all of these permissions to world readable. You just click on data set and you can do it from here. It's read access only. It can be consumed by other apps in either GeoJSON or vector tile format, and access through REST endpoints. So if I have a published project and I want to make that public, you can do that if all the data sets are public. And what's cool about this is now there is a category here, URL. You can embed the map in a web portal or application. And you can customize that. So if you want the banner, Spatial Studio banner, you can have it or not, or you can decide if you want a streamline map. Whatever you want, you can just customize it, copy it here, and then you're ready to go. You can now export and import a project. When you export a project, all the metadata and data sets are available as a zip file. So then you could share it with someone, they can import it, and they can use it. They don't have to know the connection. They don't have to do an uploading of data. It's all available to them. It's also a great way to back up another studio instance. And we have administrative console enhancements. Spent a lot of time here to get it better organized, make it easier to find things. Also more customization as well. So another cool feature is you can go to the general category under administration, and we have something called a brand manager. So again, you can use your company name or whatever you want, your logo, and instead of showing Spatial Studio, you can put it right here and have it show up as the way you want it to look. Right, so that is really a brief overview. I'm going to hand it over to LJ to show some of these, since I know we don't have a whole lot of time. All right. LJ, you ready to go?
Yep. You can hear me?
Yes.
All right. So thank you, Carol. And that's a very good and brief introduction to the new features. And what I'm going to do is all live demos. So if anything, goes wrong, I will blame either the internet or the weather. Anyway, so I'm just going through the list of the features. Most of them already mentioned by Carol. And the first one is custom base maps. So if you look at these maps, in addition to all the interactive data layers you add, you can also pick from one of the 4 base maps or background maps. These are built into Spatial Studio, and they are predefined, so you cannot change them. And these base maps, they load image tiles from Oracle's Map Cloud service. So what if you wanted to add your own background maps? So the way to do that is, if you're logged in as a admin, let me just refresh this application first. So if you're logged in as admin, you can see there are 2 sections. One is safe domains. This is important. I will mention that later. And the other is the base maps. Okay, so you can look at all the base maps you have. So again, these you cannot change because they are already in there. But you can add a new base map. And the base map can be either image-based or raster tiles, or it can be vector tiles. So there are a lot of third-party map service providers, including open source, OpenStreetMaps, and they all build Mapbox API compatible vector tiles so that you can just use them. And a lot of them require that you sign up with them and get a token or API key. So anyway, you can enter all of those information in the next screen. So here I'm creating a, new base map. I'll give it a name, and then because I picked vector tiles, this has to then specify a particular style sheet defining all the resources and the tile server location, etc. Okay, so for that I have a URL here already. Okay, so this I already signed up with this particular map vendor. And you can see, it requires a API key, and the key is here. So I can enter this, right? And now I can do a quick view, see if it's getting this particular base map from this map vendor. So it looks good. I will say add. So now you have this base map. Now, what does this safe domains do? Well, before you can actually see the map tiler, the new custom base map I just added, you have to make sure the domains for that external service provider is added to the list of safe domains so that Spatial Studio will not block them. Because once you actually wanted to see the base map, Spatial Studio is going to issue requests to this particular external server to get to the tiles and the style sheets and maybe icons and the sprites. So all of those access will be blocked by default unless you added the domain to this safe domain list. So I already previously added them. Now if I go back to my map, and you can see from the background settings, hold on, it's not showing up yet. All right, let me do a refresh. Well, maybe I didn't save that base map. Let's try again.
It's because you're live.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So you can see this is the new base map I just added. Okay. And it's all working as expected. So that's support for custom background maps. Next, I will be showing 3D cesium-based maps. So this is basically to support sophisticated 3D tiles. And if you are aware that for the two-dimensional geometries, there is a standard being adopted, which is based on map boxes, vector tile formats. And for in the 3D world, for things like point clouds and city models, there is a similar 3D tiles specification being standardized. And that's what we are showing here. Okay, so in order to use or display your 3D tiles, the way you do it is you can go to the Create Datasets screen, and then instead of uploading something or loading the spatial 3D data from the database, which currently is not yet supported, especially for point clouds or 3D city models. So those are being planned, but in this 20.1 release, what we made available is that if you already have 3D tiles pre-generated using other tools, and then you can bring them into Studio to be visualized. So that's what I'm doing, okay? So I can upload a zip file containing pre-generated 3D tiles. Okay, so this is a small point cloud tile set. So I'm uploading the 3D tiles. That looks good. And it's creating a new data set. Okay, so this is the new data set. And if I create a project, you can see it's using a different map visualization. Okay, so if you look at the types of visualizations we have, so in addition to the tabular view and the general purpose map view, we now also have a cesium map view of this. Okay, so now let me just grab this point cloud data set onto this map so you can see it's already visualized. Okay, and this one is relatively small. Now let me look at another larger point cloud. So this one I already previously uploaded. Let me see if I have. Yeah, I don't have a project yet. Okay, so let me just show what this larger point cloud looks like. Okay, so by larger, what I mean is it has a lot more details. Okay, so you can zoom in. As you zoom in, it's fetching finer level detailed tiles from the data set. Okay, so you are looking at the inside of a stadium. I assume you can see all the seats. Okay, So as you zoom in, you get more and more details. So this is a really very precise and detailed point cloud. Again, everything is pre-built by an external tool and then brought into Studio for pure visualization. But in the future, it's planned, again, safe harbor statement applies here, but we are planning to be able to generate these kinds of 3D tiles natively out of the point cloud data stored in Oracle Spatial Database. Okay, so that's on this 3D map stuff. Next is the GeoRaster support. So on GeoRaster, like Carol mentioned, the way you bring GeoRaster into Studio is because the GeoRaster data are always stored and managed in the Oracle database. Okay. So what you do is you will be bringing them from your existing database schema connection. Okay. So when you're creating a new data set out of tables, now you have a third option, which is called GeoRasters. Okay, so this Explorer dialog basically looks into your database schema to find all the available GeoRaster tables and the models. Okay, and there are quite a few here. And so you can bring them in, and then it's treated just like another data set. So in this case, I have this Landsat satellite imagery, and now I can create new projects to visualize this GeoRaster. Okay, so you can zoom in, zoom out, do all the things that you normally do with maps. And if you go to this GeoRaster layer settings, there's a new tab specifically providing all the options for visualizing GeoRaster. So for instance, you can pick which bands from the raster data model you want it to be displayed as the red color or green or blue channel. And if you make them all the same, you're effectively looking at this as a grayscale. So you're looking at one particular band out of your GeoRaster data model. Okay, so you can do a lot of things, and we are just getting started on this. So in subsequent releases, we may support GeoRaster algebras and other image processing operators. Again, safe harbor statements apply here. Okay, so that's GeoRaster. Next, I will show some templated analyses. So those are what Carol mentioned, a new category of spatial analysis. And those are, for instance, summarize a geometry features and then enhancing a different data set by finding all the nearest neighbors to my customers. So you are enhancing the customers table with the nearest, let's say, COVID vaccine site. Okay. So previously, in order to do that, you may need to jump through a few loops, and then it's a multi-step process, and it may not always be easy to get correct. So in this 20.1 release, we added a few commonly used spatial analysis operators that users have had some issues to correctly perform. So we made them into templated analysis so that you only need to fill in a few parameters, answer a few simple questions, and then you get the results. Okay, so let me show that. For that work, I'm going to log out and then log in as a different Studio user, since all the data sets owned by this the Austin user. Okay, so I have a map here already. Let me bring that. So this is a map showing some, 4 dealers, which are the green dots, and then the historical or recent tornadoes displayed as path. Okay, and then I will be doing some spatial analysis here. So one of the analyses I will be doing is from this new category of predefined or templated analysis. Okay. The first question I want to ask is, because I have all these tornadoes happening near, a lot of my dealers, I wanted to find out which dealers being like in most danger or being, near the most amount of tornadoes. Okay, so that's a simple question. I mean, it's a deceivingly simple question, but to do this in the database, you would to run a non-trivial spatial query, okay? And it may not be easy to get right if you are not familiar with all the spatial query capabilities and how to write spatial joins and such. So if you, to save you, headache, you can just come here and go to the analytics section. And, I can name this new data set, the dealers with most tornadoes. Okay, so for each dealer, okay, I wanted to find within a 1500 meters, find all the tornadoes and then summarize all the tornadoes occurring within 1500 miles of all my dealers, okay? And then the result will be a new column called count added to the dealer's data set, okay? So what I'm doing here is look through all the dealers and then look through all the tornadoes and then do a kind of spatial join and then, aggregating all the tornadoes that are within 1500 meter radius of the dealers, and then adding the result, the aggregate, into the dealers table, okay? And then present me with a new data set. All right, so let's see. Okay, so we have a new data set created. So in order to actually, let's first look at what this, so this is the actual query. So you can see, it might take a while if you were to write this from scratch. And then the columns, if you look at the column, you can see that there's a new count column added containing all the number of tornadoes that occurred within 1500 meter radius of each dealership. Okay, so let me see this new analysis on the map. Okay, so we have the map here showing the red dots. So these are all the dealers that had, a lot of had some tornadoes, at least one tornado that occurred within 1500 meter radius. And let me just change the display of this of those dealers to be based on the count value. Okay, so I want the circle to be bigger if they were hit by more nearby tornadoes. Okay. So I'm creating a new bin, set of bins Okay, so you can see that there are different sizes. The circle size have changed, and they're being displayed based on how many tornadoes occurred within or nearby. And if I go back to the layers, if I remove the tornado path, so you can see a better, you can get a better idea of which dealers were being in most danger of getting hit by a tornado. Okay, and then you can also just visualize the same result using a table. So I'm adding a table visualization and then grab the dealer's analysis result, and then you can see the count, and you can sort by the count value. Okay, so you get a tabular report of all the most endangered dealers. So again, it's a made-up use case, but you can apply the same analysis to in many scenarios. Okay, so that's one example of template analysis, and there are quite a few more, and there is a blog talking about those template analysis in more detail. So the next new feature I would briefly mention, I'm not actually going to do a demo, is that you can create a new project by importing it from a previously exported project. So this is mainly for use cases where you wanted to, let's say, back up a project, or you wanted to share a already built project with all the analysis, and you wanted to share this with your colleague who has a different studio instance running against, maybe a different database schema. And you can say, hey, you wanted to grab my project instead of me giving you or moving all the database tables over to your database instance. So this will save you a lot of hassle. You can just export an existing project. And when that happens, we actually bundle not only the metadata about the projects and the data sets inside the project, we also export the actual data of each data set, including all the analysis data sets. So all the data are exported as part of the project export. And then, that means the exported project is a completely self-contained bundle. And then you can just import on a different instance. And you get back all the data sets. So one note I wanted to mention is that if you are exporting a project containing analysis, so normally all the analysis that Spatial Studio created are view-based. So we store a view for each analysis. And when you export them, we actually materialize those views in the sense that we are running the view query and getting all the data sets, all the data for that view, and including everything in the zipped project export. And when you bring them in by using this import project button, you will restore the analysis as normal tables instead of views. So that's just one note I wanted to mention. So the next thing I want to briefly mention is that when you are creating a data set, from an existing spatial table, you also have the option to validate all the geometries in that table. So that's a new feature we added in Spatial Studio 20.1. And you can also do the validation from the properties of a existing data set. Okay, and then you go to this Spatial Validation tab, and you can run validations. So this will run the Oracle Spatial validation query against the source table behind this data set. Okay, and if there are any invalid geometries, such as polygons, self-crossing, and those kind of issues, they will be listed here. Okay, so we don't have the tool or capability to actually fix them, fix the geometries yet, but it's always still good to know that you have some invalid geometries which may cause issues when you are visualizing them. The other thing I want to just briefly mention is, let me sign out and sign back in as admin, because this particular functionality is only available to administrators. So from the administration console and under the general tab, you can define, where you are accessing the geocoding service and what's your firewall proxy. And then under the brand manager, you can then, customize the application banner here. Okay, so you can bring in a new logo to be used, and you can customize the banner text as well. Okay, so if you save the change and then reload Spatial Studio, you can see the banners and the text, the icons and the text in the application banner both changed. Okay, so that's just one little thing you can do if you wanted to customize a public-facing studio instance. The next item I will briefly demo is public published projects. Okay. So
LJ, just to let you know, you've got 5 minutes.
Okay, yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. So like Carol mentioned, some of the data sets, if they are based on public domain data, then you can, make them into a world readable, meaning they're public. Okay, and then if you create a project using only public data sets, and then you publish the project, what you get is then a URL that you can then copy and embed in a different web application. In this case, I'm just showing you, you can use a different web browser that's not even logged into Spatial Studio, and you can still see the published project containing that one public data set. Okay. So in this case, and you get to the full interaction, just like your normal project. Okay, and let me close this. So since I only have minutes, my last item I want to demo is actually access token. Okay, so that's one of the major new features we introduced in Studio 20.1. So with access token, what you can do is to be able to run and interact with Spatial Studio REST endpoints. You can basically do all kinds of things, like creating a function-based index on a longitude latitude data set, or even perform spatial analysis, finding all the tornadoes that's happening, in the next 24 hours, things like that, or predict, the storm track, and then figure out which of my customers might get impacted by the incoming storm. So you can do all of those things programmatically, and in order to do that, you must first have a token. Okay, so in this case, I have these tokens, and then once you have a token, then you can do, you can use basically a curl. Okay, and then you can do things like, get the GeoJSON data of a data set I already created. Okay, so let me just quickly demo this if we have time. So I'm running this from a command line. Okay, so this one, it issued the command to my Studio instance. I'm trying to get the GeoJSON or statistics of this particular data set, but it's because the data set was not found. I guess I entered the data set ID incorrectly, or maybe I deleted it. So let me just go back to the data set page. And I have this, let's say, I wanted to get this dealer's data as a GeoJSON stream, and then I can maybe use that in my separate, let's say, Apex map, right? So all you need to do is replace the ID, and then you need the correct token you just created. Okay, so you could basically embed this URL and setting the correct header in your Apex code, then you will be able to grab this data set from Studio and then display it in your Apex map or in any other third-party web applications. So let's see if this works. Okay, so you can see, we are getting all these GeoJSON data back from Studio without having to explicitly logging in and providing your, Studio user name and passwords. So this is perfect if you wanted to do, integration with other applications to either perform automated analysis or routine operations within Studio, such as generating or updating statistics of your dataset, or to bring your published map into a different application, all without giving out your Studio access keys or passwords. So with that, I will wrap up my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Eldred. You want to just put up that last slide so they can see the resources?
Sure.
There, you want to, it's a little bit small, but anyways, there is the Studio homepage. You can go and look at FAQs or download it, YouTube channel. And here are the blogs. The blogs that I mentioned are all located here in the spatial blogs. Also have tutorials, etc. Just want to give you that resource page for last slide. Thanks, everyone.
Great stuff. Yes, thanks, LJ. Thanks, Carol. We have posted most of the links, first of all, in the chat, and not all of them. So it was good to have them up. Maybe actually you want to still copy them into the chat just so that everybody has them.